Hello, Jim Spodek. This is my second video, picking off where we left off with the first video. So I am now served at the. They came to my house, the Racine Police Department. Kind of interesting because I'm out and about, and my daughter calls me and said there's two policemen at the door that I think want to serve you. So I said, give them the phone. So I talked to him and I said, I'm not home, but I'll be home in an hour or so. We'll come back. So I did. I came home within probably an hour and a half. And of course, it was right around Christmas, so I'm trimming the tree. And I get a phone call, and it's Thomas Holmes. And he says, I just got served. I'm in Milwaukee. They drove all the way to Milwaukee to serve him for this nuisance property. He says, they're probably coming to you. I had told them that, they were going to come back. The doorbell rings. And of course, I know who it is. And Holmes hears it on the phone. He goes, tell those guys to tell the chief that I said F you. And I'm thinking, that ain't going to happen right now. Anyway, I go to the door. The guys serve me. They're in full riot gear. Come on. If there's any chance of intimidating you, you're certainly trying. Anyway, so, I take the complaint. I think I had to go to court on this within a week, and then it was another court date in February, which would have been about 2 months out. Couldn't go over to the property, couldn't touch it, I was totally under lock, that from the city of Racine. So I'm ticked. I get done. I'm like, it's sunk in the next day, the day after. So Christmas morning, I get up, and of course I'm still mad, but we had Christmas Eve. It was very nice, family get together. I start to think to myself, have they done this to anybody else? Have they just basically targeted a piece of property and gone after it? Problems are one thing, targeting's another. So I went to the city website, and I went to the meeting minutes, and I realized there was meeting minutes for almost all the meetings back to 2006. So I thought, I'm going to go to license and public license committee meetings, and I went back to 2006. Now, I went through every minute of every meeting for 6 years. I started to go through it. By the end of the day, I had found Jose and Maria Maldonado at the Cruise Inn, and I had followed it, and I'm wondering, how could they be taking these people's license away? They didn't do anything. They had one skirmish, and then, kind of back and forth, and I kind of thought, well, there's something here, but we'll get into that story later. So as I'm going through this, I'm contemplating, how am I going to, compile all this? So I made a couple of calls to a couple of attorneys. They said, well, what you really need to do is, they gave me some guidelines. And so what I did is I grafted all the applications for liquor licenses, all the rejections for liquor licenses, where the location was, and then I broke down the individual bars. I broke them down to whatever the police call would have. They had a call simple list. I would break it down to assaults, down to civil disturbances, down to drug activity, fighting, assaults, on and on. And I broke everyone down. So what I did is I got all the police reports, and then I went through and grafted each bar. And a number of them, white bars, black bars, Hispanic bars. I took as many I could find within a geographic area. I think there's 128 different licenses. I didn't do the Applebee's and different things, although you could have. I even took locations where the bar was located and what happened to the bar after a license was taken. Did anybody move into that location, or was that specifically? One of the things I found out from these meetings were concentration of liquor licenses in the area. That was a code. And the other one was fragility of the neighborhood. And I mean, as I was going through the actual Common Council videos, I would almost start to laugh. I mean, some of the aldermen couldn't even say the word. So as I dug, I started to compile all this evidence. Well, now I've got all this evidence. Now, what am I going to do with it? And I'm thinking, holy mackerel, the community should know what's actually going on here, because I broke it down into a pattern. And as I went through each of them, the same pattern kind of emerged in it. Went to the FBI website, and it was a pattern or practice. And that's, of course, where I came up with the name. And so I thought, I'm going to get this out. So I contacted some aldermen, gave them some information. I started to look who could champion this, because obviously I'm not an expert in this, but I mean, I could see what I can see. I then I read some articles in the Insider News, which was a paper owned by Ken Lumpkin in the city of Racine, and he had been doing that for a number of years. So, of course, I'm thinking, well, I'm just going to go over there and talk to this guy. So, I do. I sit down with him, and he's, buying my paper. He wants me to buy his paper. I'm like, dude, I'm not buying a black newspaper. Being a white guy, it's not going to work. But as I started to look at his articles and we started to discuss things, he had been down there and he had been saying basically the same thing I had through his newspaper. The black community kind of probably knew a little bit about it. I don't know if they believe it or not at the time, but I did. And I started to say, how do you get this information out? And, he was telling me it's difficult. But he said, why don't you start a newspaper? So I thought, yeah. Anyway, I got a clip here of Ken Lumpkin, and it really kind of solidified the fact that I thought, this guy is the real deal. I'm not going to be led astray by him. He had been through the civil rights, and I just want to show that clip. So, let's take a look, and you can see how I felt after I talked to him. I wanted to continue on.
And I grew up at a time of the civil rights movement, when Dr. King was very active. I got involved in the civil rights movement as a projectorist. I used to show the films whenever we have a civil rights march or some type of event. We had people trained to protect the women. And so I would show, not video clips because it wasn't video, but I would show film clips of how to protect the women. We used to take wet newspaper, put it around our waist, so when the police would jump on us with billy clubs, we was protected, and we would fall on top and cover up the female participants. Another interesting thing we used to do is we used to carry black pepper, and whenever they would sick the dogs on us, we would throw black pepper on them, and they would turn on their handlers, and we used to think that was very cute. It was interesting growing up at that period of time.
Okay, now you can see he's the real deal. And, I felt comfortable with Ken, and I thought, give me some guidance, because he had been through, kind of an old war horse. He kind of knows a little bit about what's going on in the African-American community. And, he would go to bars, and he knew what was happening. So we discussed it a little bit further, and he suggested, he kept pushing on me, start a newspaper. And I said, I don't know anything about a newspaper. I actually don't want to do a newspaper. I don't have the time for a newspaper. Well, anyway, he kind of talked me into it. He said, I'll tell you what, I will help you with the newspaper if you name it the name I'm going to give you. And I thought, all right, the communicator. Apparently he had a communicator years prior, and he had kind of this name. He wanted the communicator to live again. So I cut a deal with him. I said, you give me some support, tell me how to get this thing done. I need some graphics. I need a little help with this. The communicator was born. Now, obviously, I was a one-trick pony. I wanted to get this information to the community, and I thought, well, a newspaper is going to do it. I couldn't get it to the Journal Times. I sent stuff everywhere. Of course, I'm just like a madman. I'll just shoot that stuff out there, and hopefully it sticks. Somebody's going to look at it. Well, nobody wanted to believe it. First off, it is difficult. First off, you're dealing with bars. You're dealing with it's not something people are going to say, oh, I'm going to champion, bar life and that. It's not. And then, of course, we're talking minority bars, even on top of it, which probably is rung lower. And hip hop. But it's, again, we go back to the fact that it's a constitutional right. It's not about black bars. It's not about lifestyles. It's about your rights as an individual and a citizen that were fought for by veterans, by our founding fathers. And this is what you stand up for. So it may not be popular and it may not feel real good, but this is the reason I did it, and I'm sure a lot of people that helped me along the way felt the same way. So the communicator is born. So I've got a couple copies here of the old communicator here. This was our first one, introductory edition. It was what it was. And of course, we moved on. One nation under surveillance. Of course, we had articles in there on the bars, and then of course the striking Park 6 story, which really did kind of we definitely got the dust stirred up. People were talking about it, and of course my favorite, the hippies were right. So the communicator, it initially did what I wanted it to do. I wanted to bring some things into the community. I had 123 locations. I mean, literally, I would drive around, I'd pick the paper up. We did it twice a month. Pick it up, drive it into Racine. Picked it up in Elkhorn, no, Delavan. Drive it in. I mean, take a day. Pick it up, run around, drop it off. I mean, literally, just walk in an open pantry. Yeah, your paper's delivered. I throw it on the shelf. And no, just did it, and it stuck. And the paper got out. And the first couple were a little slow. I was picking up a few, but after that, I mean, it started to get picked up in the neighborhood. Was it enough to get the information out there? It worked somewhat. I know that some of the aldermen had brought it up. That again, there wasn't enough there to say, hey, let's look into this. Is there really something here? It's not something a politician's going to champion. So again, we got to bring it into the fold. So that's where it's at. The communicator's born. I'm going to do the next video. We're going to start to talk about the documentary and how that got started, and some of the people involved with that. So until next time, bye-bye.